Lou here. I love indie games. I love how experimental, thought-provoking, and open to creativity compared to big budget developer companies. At least, some indie games are open to creativity. That's why today I want to talk about one of my new favorite indie games. Let's check out The Path. The Path was created by Belgian indie game developer company Tale of Tales on March 18, 2009 to some positive reviews. This is pretty much their only game that has positive reviews, because all of their other games have mixed to downright fully negative reviews. I was gonna say I don't know if the game company is still up due to financial failures, but apparently they're making a remake of their game Endless Forest as of 2022, so that's a good thing. Maybe someday we'll get a remake for The Path, too. Actually, their most famous game is The Graveyard, which you probably saw on every depressing video game top 10 list from the 2010s. It's supposed to be very artsy, but you basically play an old lady walking through a graveyard before you sit down and she passes away. I mean, it'd be fine if it was free, but they wanted $5 for it, and that's expensive as hell for what you're offering here. Anyway, The Path remains an extremely obscure title though, even when the YouTuber Izzy covered the game with the video standing at 1.2 million views at the time I'm writing this video. I hardly see a soul talk about this game, which is a shame because I genuinely feel like this is a game that would thrive today, in a world where game stories are getting more and more vague and artsy for theory channels like Game Theory or storytelling channels like Gamersalt trying to decode the story. Anyway, let's get our baskets ready and head to grandmother's house to take a look at the story, or at least try to explain it. So, a lot of this story is open to interpretation, but I'm going to try my best and explain based off information we get through the game itself, as well as promotional material. The game is, first and foremost, a contemporary-esque retelling of Little Red Riding Hood, using multiple sisters at different stages of life with names associated with the color red to explain the main theme of Little Red Riding Hood in greater detail, which is stranger danger and growing up. Specifically women growing up, just because media for this was scarce at the time, and it's just a lot more fucking complicated. The Red sisters all live together in a small house or apartment in the city with their mother always out of the picture, likely due to work, and clearly don't have any father figure in the picture, according to some dialogue from a few of the sisters. Their grandmother is sick and possibly dying, so their mom sends one of them, or all of them, to go to grandmother's house to give her a get well gift. Except they're told they must stay on the path to be safe, which they all ignore and then encounter their wolf just like the fairy tale. In this story, the path is basically a safe way of life where nothing bad happens to you and constantly avoiding anything and everything to avoid getting hurt. While the forest itself is basically life itself. You have really beautiful areas like big meadows to frolic in or a fun park to play in, but there's also some ugly parts too. There's dead animals, graveyards, and overall some pretty dangerous shit out there. So when the girl encounters their wolf, in some cases, it is technically a traumatic experience that basically shuts them down or shuts them out of the house at the title screen. I've seen some say they actually died from these experiences, but I doubt it, only because some of these experiences are pretty survivable or you just don't generally die from in a modern story. Robin, for instance, is the youngest of the sisters at 9 years old. From my own memories of being that age, it's a time where all you want to do is play and you don't really have situational awareness. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've seen kids that age at the pet store purposefully engage in animals they're not supposed to without permission, or just kind of go a little nuts. That's why her experience is that she tried to ride a wolf or harassed a feral dog, which presumably attacked her. When you get to the grandmother's house after the encounter, it basically turns into a trauma trip. Imagery that has to do with their wolf and traumatic experiences. For Robin's case, this traumatic attack caused Robin to realize that animals are actually very dangerous, as the sudden realization of life or death kicks in. Presumably she was attacked that badly that she might have almost died. So it's this poor girl basically having an existential crisis as well as trauma from being attacked by a dog. Rose is 11 and basically wants to act like an adult already because she's a tween. Being a tween can be kind of a frustrating phase of life because Being a tween means you're almost a teenager, and so you want to experience full teenagehood already. However, Rose's whole thing is basically showing how immature she actually is by viewing the world around her as black and white, where good things happen to good people and bad things happen to bad people. In her case, Rose goes out to the lake on a boat and presumably gets hit with some kind of heavy storm or hurricane which almost drowns her. I say this because rain and heavy weather seems to be strong themes. Not sure what the fuck the bathroom meant though. It could be that Rose got a visit from Aunt Flo and thought it was something bad happening to her, because apparently that's a thing that girls think when someone doesn't give them the talk on Mother Nature's fuck you. Before anyone asks, yes, you can absolutely get it at 11. It's not as uncommon as it sounds, actually. So Rose's trauma is coming to the realization that things just happen in the world and there's no reason for it. Possibly falling into anxiety and a fear of storms. I don't know, but I sure as hell do get the vibes of someone developing anxiety from her room. Ginger is 13 and sort of the middle child of the sisters. Like many 13-year-olds, she's basically refusing to admit she's reaching teenagehood and will soon be a high school student, so she still tries to act as childish as possible so she can try to be a kid just a little longer. To me, she gives off major Peter Pan vibes, especially when her design itself just makes her look like she's one of the Lost Boys. Ginger's is probably the more complicated one because being 13 is so damn complicated emotionally. In this case, Shark Week has paid Ginger a visit considering the rust and bloody imagery of her house, and possibly cramping imagery. Her wolf of the girl in red can also be a metaphor for turning red, if you catch my drift, but I like to think that Ginger's case, it's realizing she can't be a child forever. There's a lot of barbed wire imagery in her house, and while some think that's actually cramps, which is probably true because everyone knows that hurts like a bitch, but I personally think Ginger really badly hurt herself and probably got tetanus, or an infection because of the rusty barbs. I was thinking that maybe this was some kind of barbed fence she liked to go under a lot when she was younger to go somewhere else to play, but getting bigger and her friends with the same maturity urging her to still go under the barbed wire, she probably severely hurt herself and it traumatized her. This is where I think we see a divide between the sisters' traumatic metaphors. In this case, Robin, Rose, and Ginger, I view them all as hardships we have to endure to grow up. Like the classic example of falling off the monkey bars after your parents told you that you aren't physically strong enough to hold yourself up, you know? In this case, I view the last three as actual traumatic experiences that you desperately wish to avoid, but I personally don't think serve as a life lesson, and instead something that just happens. One of which I wish didn't happen, but we'll get to that. Ruby is 15 and is basically the poster child for the game. I don't blame them because she actually has a lovely design. It's like so 2009, it actually hurts. Like, if you showed me this character in 2009, I would literally be frothing at the mouth because of how much I want to dress like her. At 15, this is when your emotions and life experiences really make possible mental health illnesses come to the surface, like anxiety, depression, ADHD, and more. In this case, it's very obvious Ruby has severe depression and has used the goth fashion style as a sort of expression of that. But she's also engaged in self-harm, which is pretty alarming that none of her sisters seem to notice. Likely due to both depression and desperation for attention, she starts doing some pretty dangerous things like smoking, drinking, and hanging out with older men. According to her wolf and room, in this instance, one of the older men was drunk driving and crashed into her high school, where Ruby ended up with a broken leg from the accident and now has to wear a leg brace. This incident left her pretty traumatized for obvious reasons, but I also think it could have been a wake-up call for her to try and seek help for her depression by going to the school counselor, her mom, or one of her sisters. I say this because the path ultimately has a hopeful message to it about how we grow through our experiences of trauma, but I don't fully agree with that in the case of Ruby and Carmen. Carmen is 17 and honestly the only one of the sisters whose story is genuinely uncomfortable, and I don't believe proves to be a learning experience through trauma at all, but that's just me. In this case, at 17, it's easy to feel like you're an adult already, so you try and rush it and do adult things like drinking, partying, and trying to do the horizontal tango when you're clearly not ready for it. In Carmen's case, who is also the biggest reason I believe the girl's father is out of the picture, she feels like she needs a man to make her life feel happy and complete. Due to this desperation, clearly stemming from daddy issues, she goes out to some pretty shady places to try and find a guy to hook up with, without realizing the danger she's putting herself in. In this case, her wolf is a huntsman. In the original story, the huntsman saves Red Riding Hood by rescuing her and the grandma from the wolf by freeing them from a closet in modern versions, or cutting the wolf open in ye old versions. Not really sure what the original purpose of that is, but the huntsman in this version plays into that whole stranger danger warning. He gets Carmen drunk and then assaults her. She's 17, guys. That's a literal child. There is no way in hell she can consent to that, especially while drunk, and is deeply traumatized by this situation. Hers is just genuinely the most uncomfortable to me because I genuinely wish I didn't have to do her house because of the whole imagery, just knowing that this is a kid, and it just makes you wish that Carmen did stay on the path, which who knows. Maybe that was the point of hers. Finally is Scarlett at 19 and is the oldest of the sisters. At 19, you've already graduated high school and you're ready to be a fully fledged adult in college. But like many, especially right now, Scarlett can't go to college or live as a freeing adult due to life circumstances. Due to her mother working so hard to keep 6 sisters living in a stable house with food on the table, she basically is left to be the mom of the household and take care of her sisters. Meanwhile, because she has to take care of her sisters because Carmen is too immature to help, it means you have to give up your dreams, which I think can be something we all kind of experience in some way. Whether it's due to health issues or life getting in the way, sometimes you have to let go of certain dreams. In this case, Scarlett had dreams of being a pianist, and her wolf is presumably her music teacher or something like that, who tried recommending her to a college, but she had to decline. Her house following doesn't fully match, but I think it's less trauma and more all her fears causing a traumatic breakdown. Her fear of germs, filth, fear of failure, fear of never getting to live out her dreams, etc. With all the girls shut out because of their traumas, it's up to the girl in white. Now, I personally think that the girl in white is both a metaphor for basically your conscience that we all never listen to, and a cameo of Tale of Tales' other game 8. Apparently she's the main character in that game, and she's actually deaf and mute, so that's interesting. The game was never finished, but it was apparently a retelling of Sleeping Beauty. Not really important, but I guess it is, because it's sort of another fairy tale reference. Anyway, so after getting a TLDR of every girl's main room in the house, I think this is when the girl in white could be a friend of their conscience, helping them through their trauma in a way. This is when all the girls come back after the girl in white, all bloody now, leaves, where it's implied they all overcame their trauma by the fact that they closed the door behind them, basically meaning that their past and issues are finally behind them. As a final thing to note here, when you get to the grandmother's house in the failed endings and the girl in white's ending, notice how she has her wolf stuffed in the corner of the room. I mean, I thought that was really cool to me because I think it shows that even grandma conquered her wolf by literally stuffing it. To me, I think that kind of means the main message is to conquer your wolf in some capacity. The end. To me, I think this kind of storytelling, besides Carmen's, that's actually pretty brilliant. I've seen some also say that there were no sisters and that this all happened to one person, but that's been like the one thing Tale of Tales has debunked several times apparently. So no, this is just a bunch of sisters going through some serious shit. Overall, the story of The Path is an amazing metaphor for true ups and downs of life. The angstier version of Turning Red, if you will. Some say The Path's gameplay is weak, but I also weirdly like it. Like, it's one of those games where I have to be in a specific mood to play it, obviously, otherwise I'll get bored, but there's some kind of relaxing, ominous feeling about it. Throughout the game, all you're going to be doing is walking around the forest to either immediately go encounter your wolf, or seek out some collectibles to read their comments on it, as well as adding extra rooms in the respective girl's house. Now, don't get me wrong, this game was clearly made in the slap the bloom effect on everything to hide how ugly this game actually looks era, but actually at least tried their best with what they got here. I mean, some models actually do look pretty nice. Robin's model in particular is adorable with the way her hood bobs up and down when she walks, and Ruby's is pretty nice too. Well, some of the models look a bit noodly, especially Rose and the girl in white, with their arms just looking thin and weird to me. The forest itself actually does have a sense of curiosity but danger to it, with how dead the forest obviously looks, but also weirdly welcoming in it with its cute little pinwheel flower things you find. After collecting a certain amount of flower pinwheels, it'll update your compass to show you where your next item you haven't found is. The map is actually pretty cool and non-intrusive. It doesn't take away from looking at the forest, but is also pretty helpful because it is just a basic compass. The black scratching you see on my screen is to indicate the wolf you're supposed to encounter, and the white swirly thing is to encounter as a bonus or comment by one of the girls. To be honest, with the sort of collect-it-all vibes this game kind of tries to do to pad out the time just a little bit, it does make me wish there was at least one Steam achievement just so there's kind of at least a little replay value in trying to get all the objects on the map. Each sister also has a different walking speed, with Rose, at least to me, being the slowest and Ruby being the fastest, which also might be a metaphor for how each girl approaches life, but I could be overanalyzing. The music, which I rarely talk about, is also excellent too. If you're new here, Coraline is my favorite movie ever made, and the soundtrack hits me hard with Coraline vibes. So I say it gets an A+ for that. Actually, this is gonna sound really dumb, but I was actually humming the main theme of the game a couple of times while I was playing because I liked it that much. I mean, I don't know if Coraline was an inspiration because the game released a month after the movie did, so that's a pretty short time span to compose all that music and then code it into the game, but it also wouldn't surprise me if it did end up becoming a slight inspiration towards the end. Another thing is that some people say the game is poorly optimized, but I didn't really have any issues with this game. The only major one was that my controller was being a little bitch in response to the engine, but that's about it. Overall, while the gameplay can be a little slow because it is genuinely just a walking simulator, I think it can be relaxing depending on someone's mood and if someone is in the mood to just walk around and collect things. Okay, while The Path is not my favorite game of all time because nothing is ever going to replace Silent Hill 2 and Omori, it's definitely at least one of my favorites. From its incredible storytelling, great soundtrack, fantastic use of playing with color saturation to create an atmosphere, decent models for an indie game like this at the time, and more, that the game feels like it's actually a bit ahead of its time. I mean, in its direction and storytelling, goodness knows the gameplay is obviously a product of its time given how indie game development actually was at the time this game was made. I just hope you all give The Path a chance as a game because it's genuinely really cool and I feel like it is absolutely a hidden gem. I'm also the queen of obscure artsy bullshit since another one of my favorite games is about a girl finding out how all her relatives died. Which, by the way, if you guys would like a review for that, please let me know down below. I would love to gush over what remains of Edith Finch. With that, though, thank you guys so much for watching. This is something semi-quick and different I like to do now and then, where I talk about obscure-ass indie games no one's heard of in decades. What did you guys think of this video? Do you plan to play the game, or have you heard of this game before? As always, let me know down below. Hey guys, thanks for watching! If you liked the video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing if you're new. If any of you would like to help support my channel in any possible way, my Ko-fi page is down below in the description, along with all of my social media. For any subscribers, new or old, who'd like to help with video ideas, or maybe just want to talk about anime or something, I have a fan server linked down below. See you next time!